Hi, this is E.T. Much of the info in this video comes from Jack Kavanagh's excellent biography. It's titled Tunney. It comes also from newspapers and other accounts from the 1920s era. And this here is former light heavyweight and heavyweight champion Gene Tunney. He's on the deck, as you can see here, for the only time during his long ring career. It took place on September 22 of 1927. It was at Soldiers Field in Chicago. You see hovering over him is former champion Jack Dempsey, hoping to regain his heavyweight crown. It was taken by Tunney exactly 1 year earlier. That was in Philadelphia. For reasons I'll explain later, this seventh-round knockdown remains even to this day as one of the most controversial episodes in boxing history. What even devoted fans don't know is this. This was the most publicized and heard, because of the new medium of radio, boxing match in history. So much so that it attracted not only a pretty massive crowd, I think it was about 45,000, but it was the largest group of influential moguls and politicians, sports greats ever assembled for any sports event. Politicians. There were 9 U.S. senators and 12 congressmen. Entertainers included John Barrymore, Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, who else? Gloria Swanson, Al Jolson, Tom Mix, the cowboy star, and many other film greats. Also the top movie producers. The business elites included Alfred Sloan, president of General Motors, Walter Chrysler, Dr. Charles Mayo from the Mayo Clinic, presidents of 6 of the biggest railroads, presidents of the largest industrial companies, including Carnegie Steel, some of the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the Harrimans, the Astors were there. There were heads of 6 oil companies. Even royalty was there. Sports celebs included, and this isn't all, former champions James J. Corbett, Jack Johnson, Benny Leonard, Jim Jeffries, Batley Nelson. It goes on. The fight was rumored to have been heard on radio by 50 million people worldwide. Now that's according to the National Broadcasting Corporation, NBC. It was called by famed ring announcer Graham McNamee, and it was carried by 5 stations in Chicago alone, which, by the way, cut down on the attendees. This fight was in its day bigger news than any before or since, including the Thrilla in Manila. Whatever. As to the fight, Dempsey comes into the ring aged 32, looking fit and tanned. He has a few days of growth, making him look fearsome, a countenance not equaled until Sonny Liston. Tunney, by contrast, enters the ring minutes later. He looks pale in comparison. Now, this is partly due to what they used then, overhead Klieg lights, and he looked very thin. Although their first encounter was only a year ago, the attitude of those attending had flipped 180 degrees. When they first met, the fans feared for Tunney's life, and they were angry still that champion Dempsey had, to their minds, dodged the draft during World War I, the Great War. They referred to him as a slacker. And they openly cheered in this first fight Tunney. They taunted Dempsey, and they resented, too, Dempsey's 3-year absence from the ring while he made movies, did exhibitions. But now, in the second bout, the crowd overwhelmingly favors the former champion Dempsey, who is the real slugger, fighter, willing to exchange punches. He's always aggressive. He refuses to stop until his opponent was downed and comatose, or he was. The crowd appreciated the grace with which Dempsey took his first loss. And they saw Tunney as a feat. Too much quoting of Shakespeare, too much commuting with the literati, the rich and well-born, but not with his peers in the fight game. The crowd resented his jab and run style, his unwillingness to take a punch, to deliver another one. The journalist Paul Gallico put it this way: Tunney was seen as, and I'm quoting Gallico, a prickish, snobbish, bookish fellow, too proud to associate with common prize fighters. As to the fight, it was all Tunney until round 7. Dempsey charging, Tunney effectively counterpunching, dodging away. By then it was obvious to just about everybody except Dempsey's corner that he needed a knockout to win. But everybody could see Dempsey is slowing down. Then a minute into the 7th round, Dempsey, who by the way had predicted a 7th round knockout victory, avoided a Tunney left and then exploded a right to Tunney's head. Then came the vicious left hook, and the crowd, business magnates, princesses, bankers, steelworkers, all of them jumped up cheering as Tunney fell down into the ropes, into the canvas, for the first time in Tunney's long career. It's here that one of the most contentious events in sports history took place, not to be equaled until the second Ali Liston encounter decades later. Dempsey, who was very well aware of a recent boxing rules change demanding that a fighter who scores a knockdown go to a neutral corner, remained standing over Tunney, looking as he did, growling down back in 1919 when he'd beaten a bruised and bloody Jess Willard to the canvas. And while the timekeeper shouted out the number, referee Dave Barry shouted for Dempsey to move to a neutral corner. Now, just how many seconds Tunney got to recover as Barry took up the count, we're not absolutely sure. It was at least 14 seconds, maybe 15. Whatever, Tunney pulled himself upright by the ref's count of 10 and danced and jabbed his way to victory. With the exception of Dempsey's corner, everybody agreed with the decision, just about. Dempsey was outboxed throughout the fight, winning only the 7th round, and that only because of the knockdown. And Dempsey's face showed severe punishment. He's cut along both eyes. He's got a cut on his left ear. His face is very bruised. Well, Tunney appeared no worse for wear, save for a lump on the back of his neck from Dempsey's continued rapid punches. Now, what you may not know, the long count did not become an issue until the next day, and that's when newspapers covered it in vivid detail. McNamee, the ring announcer, never mentioned it on the air. He even went on to say, and I'm quoting McNamee, "Ladies and gentlemen, I assure you there were no fouls in this fight. There was nothing questionable that I saw." Then the long count episode, after the newspapers discussed it, began its long debated controversy. Also not discussed much is Tunney's flooring Dempsey in the 8th round. Tunney put him down, and for whatever reason, the referee Barry immediately began his count before Tunney moved to a neutral corner. Okay, it did not matter much since Dempsey was up at the count of 2, but it raises a question regarding something else, and not much discussed today. This super publicized fight was the subject of a huge amount of equally huge betting. Keep in mind this fight is taking place in Chicago, notorious for organized crime and political corruption. A lot of racketeer cash was bet on Tunney to win, and one can reasonably assume that certain people would do, well, what's necessary to win. Dempsey was so worried about it that somebody was going to poison his drinks or his food, which may have happened before the first Tunney fight, that he took super precautions. That so much betting money was out there, Some thought that referee Dave Barry may have been bought off. But let me emphasize here, there's no evidence existing to support that claim, and Barry had a good reputation. The aftermath? Tunney went on to defend the title once more, 11-round KO victory over Australian Tom Heaney. Heaney was ranked 4th in the world, and he'd beaten a future heavyweight champion, Jack Sharkey. Tunney then retired to fashionable Stamford, Connecticut. He married Polly Lauder, a socialite, a member of the very wealthy Vanderbilt family. And one of their 4 children, John Tunney, was elected a U.S. Senator from California in the 1970s. And that, boys and girls, is the story. Like and share the video. Subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you.